Meet Bob Olson. Bob's the author of Answers About the Afterlife and the host of Afterlife TV, a private investigator who began investigating life after death in 1999. Bob now records his interviews with experts, authors, and people who've had extraordinary experiences so he can share it all with you. Enjoy the show.
Hi everybody, this is Bob Olson with Afterlife TV. You can find us at afterlifetv.com. This is where we talk about the afterlife, we look for evidence, and we talk about the meaningful questions, hopefully the meaningful questions, hopefully I ask those during these interviews, that everybody's thinking in terms of the afterlife. Today is a very special conversation, as I like to call them, with an author named Natalie Sudman, who was nearly killed by a roadside bomb in Iraq in her little convoy of 4 vehicles on the way back to base camp. As a result, she had all kinds of consequences, physical, emotional, and spiritual. We're going to focus on the spiritual here, but we'll talk about all 3 of those. This is her first interview ever since writing her book, and I'm really grateful that she's doing it here on Afterlife TV. Thank you, Natalie, for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Well, we're so excited. This is exciting because you have officially, I guess what people would say, have had a near-death experience, and yet I think it went so much further than that. And let's give a little shout-out before we get started to Tom, who made this all happen with the technology. You live in a remote area of Arizona that we tried this once before. It didn't really work, and here you are. Thanks to Tom, who allowed us to get together, and you're doing it from D.C. now. I want to show your book. This is called Application of Impossible Things by Natalie Sudman. Excellent book. In fact, I'll be so honest as to say we got this book in from your publisher. I thought, oh, it's kind of a thin book. There's probably not much substance in there. Oh, no, just the opposite of that. I just had to read a few pages before I was saying to my wife, Melissa, I have got to have her on Afterlife TV. And here we are, finally. I'm so excited about it. All right, let's start actually with the title, Application of Impossible Things. When you used that title, when you wrote that title, what were you thinking? What does it mean to you?
Well, I think, a lot of people consider spiritual things to be sort of separate from our daily physical lives, or a lot of them to be impossible to apply to our physical lives. And I don't think they are impossible. I think it's really important that those spiritual things, whether they be ideas or ways of being, have to be applied, and really are applied whether we realize it or not.
Yeah, and that really comes through in your book, which is great. And also, it's important to point out, I mean, you come, well, we're going to talk about your background in a second, but when you were working in Iraq, for instance, I mean, you're working with a bunch of soldiers, and so you guys aren't probably sitting around talking about spiritual things very often, were you?
No, I was actually working mainly with civilian army.
Oh, you were? Okay, civilian army. All right.
But band were officers in the army.
Oh, okay. All right.
But no, that kind of thing didn't come up.
You guys weren't like saging the room to clear the energy? No, none of that. Okay. All right. Well, we got a little picture of you here, here with President Bush. Why don't we work our way up to that? First of all, what were you doing in Iraq before you were injured?
I was hired to administer construction contracts for the Corps of Engineers. So I started out, I was kind of on the ground, making sure that the right things are done at the site and taking care of problems that came up during the different contracts. And then I switched over to kind of putting together contracts, making sure the money was in place for them and getting them awarded to the contractors, and then kind of tracking them on a much more administrative level than I had been earlier. But yeah, that's what I was.
You're an adventurous type, obviously. Originally, you had helped with some of the hurricane people who were devastated by the hurricane. Why don't you tell us just a little bit about that and how you ended up going to Iraq as a result of it?
I worked for the Bureau of Land Management as an archaeologist, and in the course of doing that, the Corps of Engineers put a call out to all government employees asking for volunteers to go down and help clean up Katrina. So I volunteered a couple of times, once in Mississippi and once in Louisiana. And in the course of that, I met some Corps of Engineers employees, and they invited me. A friend called me up one day and said, "We've got a job in Iraq if we want it. Do you want to go?" And I said, "Sure." Hung up the phone and went,
yeah. Okay. That sounds like your personality from what I've got to know. You're kind of like, yeah, and then think about it later, right?
Right.
Okay. Good. I like that. All right. So you find yourself in Iraq, and you're actually there for about 1.5 years, right?
Right. Yeah.
And tell us about the particular day in question here where something happened, a little catalyst to change your life.
There was 4 of us that went out in the field to look at some construction projects. We looked at 3 water projects and then a road project. And I went along because the 2 of the people didn't know anything about roads. That was under their jurisdiction. So, and I knew a lot about roads. And I took along this new guy who had only been in about 5 or 6 weeks in country. And so I took him along so he could see the water projects.
What's his first name?
Jared.
Jared? Okay.
Mm-hmm. So he and I were in one truck, and the 2 actually Army officers that I was helping with the road, they were in a second truck, and then we had a lead truck and a gun truck in our convoy. And we were also, because this province had been turned over to the Iraqis, the government had been turned over to the Iraqis, we had to take along an Iraqi police escort. So we had also a police escort with us.
Okay. All right. And you do your thing, spend the whole day, maybe 6 hours or something like that while you're out working in...
I remember it was probably 4, 5, 6 hours that we were out, visiting sites. And we were just not too far out from base, on our way back to base, when the vehicle that I was traveling in was a roadside bomb.
Roadside bomb. And was it a mine? What was it?
I don't really know. I never really got I guess I did get an after report, but they didn't say how it was
ignited or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so I don't know if it was a pressure thing or if they set a lot of those off using a cell phone, so it could have been detonated in that way.
And so you're riding along in the vehicle, and when this goes off, what's that experience like?
When it goes off?
Yeah. Do you even know what's happened, or?
Well, I had just, I was tired and I was bored. So I had my arm up on the windowsill and had just closed my eyes. And when it detonated, I don't know what it was like because I went immediately out of my body.
Oh, wow. So just like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved some of the terminology you use in here. And you talk about the blink environment. And basically because you blinked and you're in this new environment. Is that kind of the short of it?
Yeah.
All right. So here you are. You're riding along. You're bored. Blink. Now what's happening?
Now I find myself standing on kind of a stage area, maybe 15 or 20 feet wide. And all around me are arrayed just thousands of beings, personalities, whatever you want to call them, spirits, and like thousands of them. And I see them as white-robed beings. And I'm standing there in my fatigues, dirty, tan, slouched there, comfortable. And I'm downloading all this information to them that I understood as something that I had agreed to do for them before I came into this body. So, and it was very, very complex information, but it was all just being sort of, I don't know how to describe it, transferred, you know, as abstract or, and just all through thought.
All right. All right. So first of all, when you say thousands of beings, are we talking like a stadium of 20,000, like concert hall stadium, that type of thing? Or can you even tell? Or does it just seem to go on infinitely?
The way it looks to me, I would say that, yeah, a stadium would be a good visual for it. Yeah, because they're kind of arrayed up, you know, all around me.
So you're you're like a rock star here on stage in front of all these beings. But instantly you're not confused, you're not wondering what's going on, you know you're there for a purpose. And right away you start downloading this information because that's what you're supposed to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I knew exactly where I was. I knew exactly what I was doing. I didn't have there was no hesitation, there was no doubt. I mean, now I think I look back on it, or I can go back into it and have this sort of separate awareness of wow, I knew exactly what I was doing. But at that time, I mean, I didn't even think that way. I just did what I did.
That kind of gives you the impression, or gives me the impression anyways, I'm sure there are people watching who will probably agree, that almost like this was a planned event, like this was meant to be.
Well, I think it was a planned event. And having looked at it in my body.
Hold on, I think we lost you there for a second. Start again. We lost your volume.
Oh, okay.
Okay, now you're back. You're back. All right, go ahead. So you said you think it was a planned event?
Yeah, I think it was a planned event. I think that I planned it quite a while ago.
Yes.
And there were little, actually, in the physical world, there were little hints and clues that something was going to happen. Like a few weeks before this happened, I was getting my paperwork ready to extend for another 6 months and stay there for another 6 months. But while this was going on, I just felt this strong urge to start packing up my stuff. I was throwing some stuff away and thinking, okay, I can pack all this stuff here and this stuff here, and I need to get a couple of trunks, and then I'd stop and go, wait, what am I doing? I'm not leaving. And I think, and there were a few other things, but that's kind of the most obvious. And I think that I was getting messages that I was not paying attention to. You know, when you're working 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, you're working, and you're not, you know, when you get off, you're exhausted, and you're not really tuning into some other things that are going on.
Especially when you're planning for a trip of any sort, you know. I'm going on vacation, and it's just like, you're trying to do everything you're normally doing, plus you're trying to get ready to go. It's a little bit crazy. So you're in front of these beings. Aside from this sort of stadium-like experience, you know, what is the environment like? I've heard someone say who had a near-death experience, you know, that really everything was like this black velvety, you know, environment, yet there was like light within the darkness. Anything like that?
That's a perfect description.
Really?
I think. And I've kind of described it as being what I imagine space to be like. You know, it's black, but it's not really dark. You know, it's like potential light. As soon as something shows up, it's lit. It's lit up. So, and yeah, velvety feel. I think that describes it well. I mean, it's not an intimidating or really empty feeling darkness. It's a warm, cozy darkness. You know, in the middle of a blizzard, crawl into bed, you know, with this nice fluffy down thing, you know, nice down pillows, and close your eyes. Is that like a scary, empty blackness? No, it's like this really comfortable, cozy, delicious darkness.
Oh, that's cool. And these beings that are there, you call them the gathering sometimes, right? The gathering, what are you feeling from them? You're feeling expectation. You're feeling, to be cliche, but I don't think it is. Love, unconditional love. Admiration. What are you thinking? What are you feeling?
There was definitely admiration.
Admiration.
Yeah, which was interesting. It's interesting to look at for me now, because at the time when I'm standing there downloading all this information to them and getting back all this admiration, I was like kind of indifferent to that admiration. I was accepting it, but it didn't really mean anything to me. I was doing something that I thought was easy. So, I was accepting their admiration, but kind of going, yeah, well, whatever. And as far as, the whole ambiance, I mean, I guess people use the term love and unconditional love, but that, I guess, in some ways that doesn't really cover it for me. That sort of, it's such we have such human pictures around that.
Yeah.
And for me, it was, I would say that it was a complete and total acceptance. And I use in the book the word co-passion, meaning not compassion, which kind of, to me, gives the feeling of there's kind of a hierarchy in that the person feeling compassionate toward the other person often also feels sorry for them, or there's some kind of pity or something like that. So I use the word co-passion because there was a shared passion for being and a complete equality between everyone.
Wow. First of all, it sounds incredible. I wonder too, when you were feeling that admiration, and you were sort of, yeah, whatever. I mean, I'm not sure I'm deserving of it. You think that's because there's a lack of ego involved? We're so used to dealing with our ego. I think it would be hard for most of us to be in front of 20,000 people who are admiring us in this way, and maybe not go into our heads. You think it's because you're in spirit, and this lack of ego that we have as human beings?
Yeah, I think that's probably a good explanation of it.
Yeah.
I felt there was no ego, there was no competition. I mean, I was accepting all this admiration, but in some sense I felt that same admiration for all of these beings. I mean, we all knew that it was a two-way street, and it was respect and approval and acceptance. Each
one of these beings, had they all had a human experience? What was that like?
Some of them had a human experience, and in fact, it seemed like some of them were having a human experience
simultaneously.
Mm-hmm. That they're, when you're on that level, you have this ability to focus on way more things than we could even sort of keep track of or imagine, maybe. Yeah. In the same way that we walk down the street and we're paying attention to who, if there's any threats around us, or thinking about what we're going to do when we get to where we're going, and we're paying attention to a lot of different things, and they seem to be able to do that same thing on a much broader level.
Yeah. Like even, to meet someone new, and you intuitively, at least you think you are, intuitively picking up a bunch of stuff about them, multiply that times 1,000,000, and that's probably what that experience is like. And you're doing this, so yes, there's a lot of beings, but individually, are you like focusing on one and then another and another, or are you able to sort of focus in on each one all at the same time to get a sense of what they're all like?
Yeah, I'm able to do it either way. When I'm standing there downloading, I have this awareness of them all as individuals, and I can tune into any one at any time. Yeah, it's hard to describe because, if we look out at a crowd, we can't really connect with each of those individuals as individuals at the same time.
Right.
But I really had the feeling that I could do that there, and was doing that. or I could really focus in attention on one if I wanted to do that.
Okay. A lot of questions. I'm going to jump around a little bit because so many questions pop into my head. Because I wanted to go back to the idea of whether they had. You said some had human experiences, some had not. Some were having them simultaneously at that very time. How about the others? Were they what I might call in the spirit world, in the spiritual world, just hanging out? Or were they from other dimensions, like at that time, simultaneously having some kind of an existence, a consciousness or something in another dimension? What was that all like?
I would say that some of them were having simultaneous lives in another dimension, and then there were some that this was their primary focus.
Oh.
So that they were, and this, being in this gathering was not necessarily the only thing that they were doing, but that the immediate interests of this gathering were their experience that they were doing at that time. If that makes sense.
It does. It does. And I mean, maybe from human terms, we could think of them as students or scientists or something like that. Would that be human-like accuracy? No.
Maybe,
no, Bob, you are so far off. This interview is over.
I hadn't thought of it that way, but I don't think we're really that far off, because it doesn't hurt to kind of find a parallel in the physical world so that people can understand it. And yeah, you could think of it as scientists or, as scientists. In a way that makes sense, because some of them were, wow. I'm going to have to think about this more.
Hey, that's what this is all about. Asking the meaningful questions that maybe you haven't thought of before.
Yeah. But as far as, what they were doing, there were so many things that they were doing that it's hard for me to sort of group them all together. But say there was a group who were adept at managing energy flows between dimensions.
Okay.
So maybe that's more like some kind of a manager or an artist even. And then there were others who maybe were experimenting with how to move energy in this way or that way in this one dimension. And because there's energy crossovers in dimensions, they were working with this whole group in order to understand implications of this kind of energy movement. Or does that make sense?
It does. But now you brought up the question: why don't they all know this? So I'm assuming, I tend to, and I'm sure a lot of people do, tend to just assume, oh, you're in the spiritual world, you're somewhat omniscient, or how can they not know about all this energy stuff already? You know what I mean? So that, I don't know if that makes me feel good or bad. Like, oh, they're just playing, they're experimenting here.
We don't just how when you're a kid you think, oh, when I'm an adult then everything's going to be easy because I can do whatever I want to do, and you get to be an adult and you're like, oh my God, what's going on?
I want to be a kid again. Yeah.
It's supposed to stop, I'm supposed to grow up and all this stuff is supposed to stop. Well, this being here in the physical is a creative experience, and we are creating while we're experiencing. And my understanding, you go to the spirit world or the non-physical world, and as above, so below, or as here, so between, wherever that world is,
Yeah.
we're still creative beings. I mean, as a whole self, we're still a creative being. Do you want to get in the spirit world and, okay, I know everything, and you know, how boring is that? We're still creating out there. We're still creating our reality and creating our experience and exploring and expanding.
Wonderful. I love that. That's great. Now you can't wait to get there even more. I mean, it sounds, no, really. These spiritual beings, though, you said, okay, they're here, they're doing these things, they're even these groups that you talked about that are working with energy in a certain way. That's just one thing that they're doing out of who knows how many, right?
Yeah, I think that would be accurate. Yeah, because they can hold a lot of different focus points at once, unlike, you know, on a grand scale compared to us holding, I'm aware of talking to you and of the wind blowing outside and, you know, what's going on with my feet. I don't know.
That's right. All right. So this is neat. I also wanted to ask, because I asked about the environment, the blackness. I've also heard people talk about like this sounds that most people say they can't describe, and I'm going to say this. I have to mention this. That's in this book. One of the things that I commented to my wife Melissa about was that so many people have had near-death experiences will give the short answer of, you know, that just can't be described in human terms, whatever the question may be. There's just really no way to describe. You attempt to do that. You attempt to do it, and I love how you do it because you do it. You're very careful about the words you use. So even in this interview so far, we've talked about using, you know, you like to use co-passion instead of compassion, and there's words that you prefer to use over others. I remember when you were talking about the word dimension in the book, you talked about that wasn't your favorite word. You didn't think it was the most accurate word, and you went through all these other possible words that you could use, and then came back out at the top where, so that's why dimension is the best word we have, right? You know, that's the way my mind works. I think it's exciting that you try so hard to describe this, and so now that I put you on the spot, did you hear sound, and how would you describe that sound?
That's another good question, because I don't think I talked about that in the book.
No.
And I would say that, yes, I heard sounds. On that level, for me, there was no separation between feeling or visuals and sounds. I mean, all of my senses were, in a sense, one sense. If I wanted to, I could have looked at all those beings, and instead of seeing those beings, I could have heard them as a sound, as individual sounds. I could have tasted them. I could have just felt them. It seems like all you have to do is choose that through intent. So I didn't hear, I mean, in my experience, one amazing, beautiful sound wasn't a standout characteristic. But then I was focused in a different way. And I think if I had chosen to focus on sound, I could have had this whole experience as sound.
Yeah.
And it would have been the same experience.
The interview that I did, her name was Marvina Meek. She's a cowgirl who got trampled by a horse. Like the horse fell on top of her. She had this near-death experience. She's the one who talked about the light within the darkness. And when she talked about sound, she talked about it was the best way she could describe it was like when you hear a chime ring, it was like that, the end of it, just sort of the end of that chime resonating out there. It was the best way.
I would describe that as the sound of creation.
Of what?
Yes. There's sort of a sound of creation. The sound underlying all sound. I mean, I can take myself back there and become aware of that. Yeah. It wasn't a standout kind of experience for me.
Yeah. The sound of creation. That's your next book.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. That really is. All right, so I have to stop because I know people are wondering. So you're having these incredible experiences. You've blinked. You're in the blink environment, as you call it in the book. You're with the gathering. You're downloading all this information. This is information that you gathered from this human lifetime so far, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And yet, parents and siblings are wondering, did she think of me? You know, was she worried? Any of that?
No.
No.
Sorry. No interest. No interest. I was tired, and I told the gathering that I'm tired. I'm not going to go back. And I had no thoughts. Sorry, friends and neighbors and family. I had no thoughts of any of you. I didn't care. I was all left behind, and I didn't have any interest in it.
Did you know Tom at that time?
Yeah, I did.
Oh, great. He's going to come take the computer away.
He'll laugh.
He's like, what? Give me that computer. That's mine. All right. Well, that's interesting. And is that because, well, okay, so you didn't think of it, but at the same time, I know you can go back. You can, like you just did a moment ago, you can go back and you can bring yourself back. Is that because you had a sense that you just knew everything was okay no matter how it happened? You knew everybody was going to be all right? You knew that if you decided to stay there in this other realm and not go back into your body, just everything was all going to be okay? Did you ever have that kind of a sense?
I don't think I really thought of it that way necessarily, but that was underlying it.
Okay.
And I think if I felt like that I'd left things undone, or if I felt like somebody would just, their lives would be destroyed if I chose to go on, which I can't imagine, but then maybe I would have. Then maybe I would have felt more of a pull to go back. I mean, I don't have any kids, and things like that, and maybe something like that would have given me more of a pull to go back. I don't know.
But the one thing that you did learn, or at least recognize, thanks to this gathering of thousands of beings, was how important your work here really was, right?
Well, not just mine, everybody's.
Okay. Expand on that.
Well,
why?
A lot of times we think that our lives are small and petty and are not very valuable. I'm not as valuable as the person who has control over millions of dollars, or I'm not as valuable as the person who runs a country. But it's not true. All of our lives are valuable. If you do nothing more than enjoy your day, then you have done something valuable for creation, for the all that is, God, whatever you want to call it. Just our being here is amazing, and everything we do matters. Everything has value.
You do touch upon that a little bit about, what was the word that you used? How amazing is the word that I remember you using. How amazing humans are. How amazing it is. At least you got this sense for us to have this human experience because of the skills required, the whatever it takes to required to be able to do that. You got a lot of admiration for that alone, correct?
Right. Yeah. We do. We don't really realize how amazing and totally cool we are, that we can as spirit maintain the focus that it takes to stay in our physical bodies and work in a physical environment. It takes a special kind of skill, and not all spirits or beings have, or whole beings or whatever, have developed themselves in that direction. And so what looked easy to me, because I had done it and I knew how to do it and I was pretty good at it, it didn't look amazing to me, because I was, I had gotten good enough at it that it wasn't that difficult. But that kind of razor focus that it takes us to stay here is it's a real high. It's a real thrill for the whole self to be able to do that.
That's pretty cool. Did you have any sense that you had other lifetimes? I wonder why you were so good at it. Like the gathering of the information that you had and being able to download it to all these beings. Did you have a sense that maybe you had done this before, and that's why you were good at it, or you just have a natural ability for this? Did you find out?
Well, yeah, I had a definite sense that I've done this before, and I've done it a lot. That I had, in some sense, I'd become an expert at it. And I don't know how to talk about other lives or past lives, because from that non-physical plane, it doesn't make sense to talk about past lives.
Right.
Because it's all one.
Yeah.
So that only makes sense if we're totally focused in this physical life to talk about it as past or future.
But other would make some sense, right? Another life.
Yeah, other would make sense, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. I've heard people talk about the folds, like because everything's happening at the same time, that sometimes like deja vu might be like a fold in time, like recognizing, say, if you folded the line, because of course it's not linear, but you folded the line of, two lives, or even the future and the past, what we would see as that deja vu might be that sort of, as a result of that fold in time. I don't even know what I'm talking about. Does that, because I haven't been there, does that make any sense to you? Like, what would you think, having had this experience, that deja vu is all about?
Well, I guess, wow. That is hard. That could take some explaining.
Okay.
I think, my first, I'll see if I can nutshell it.
All right.
I think that your way of thinking about a fold makes sense to me. Say a fold in energy. I mean, we think of time and space as one thing when really there's something else. And they're one strand of something much, much bigger. And it's not set. I mean, we have clocks and we think an hour is this long and space is this. But that's not the way it is. And even like Einstein's theory of relativity even touches on that. Time is relative to the individual. And so, okay, that's one string. And then I'm going to hop over to something else and see if I can bring them together. Who knows? But as a whole being, there is no time, of course. So in a sense, everything's happening at once. And yet it's not. It's happening not in a linear way, but in a much more complex way than we think of linear time. So in my physical body, it may be that my whole self, for instance, hops ahead to look at something and then hops back through focus, just through focus or intent.
Yeah.
Okay, when that hop happens, then there's going to be some interaction between those 2 points. And so I think it would make sense that then also there's some awareness brought into this physical being of, whoa, wait a minute, you know, I've done this before. Well, yeah, you have. You've already done it. You know?
Right. Well, that was brilliant. First of all, I mean, wonderful. In fact, and if people liked that explanation, that's what they get a lot of in this book. First of all, and that was one of the things that I really enjoyed about it. Second of all, I think you were thinking so hard you blew my light. So if I'm in the dark here a little, I could go turn another one on, but who cares? Because I think the metaphor of me being in the dark is pretty good, actually. And look how lit up you are, so that makes a lot of sense. I'm just going to leave it this way. But we're also wrapping up here, and there was so much more to the story. And I will say that just to give people a sense, because they should go out and get this book, Application of Impossible Things by Natalie Sudman. The blink environment is just one environment out of 3 that you go through, and you also have a rest environment where you go through another whole experience, and a healing environment where you go through this whole experience. There's never enough time for an experience with this much depth, with this, you know, to cover it all in an interview, and so that's okay. I can live with that because you've written it all down. And it would be especially sad if you hadn't, but you can, and people can get the rest of the information there. You eventually, the thing that I just want to cover before we go, because I find it very important part of your experience, is that one of the things that I gained from your book, and you just tell me if I'm wrong, is that when it comes to, and there's so much to talk about here, we can't do it in 5 minutes, but one of the things about life, and I'm just going to say this, like, to me, the purpose of life is just to have experiences, good or bad, negative, positive. That doesn't even come into play. It's just to have experiences. And you had this experience when you were still in the truck. You blinked again, and you're back in your body. You had chosen to come back into your body, and you had this. You're still sort of, in my mind, you still got one foot there in the other realm. And you had, and tell us about this idea of you had this thought that you might be blind in one eye, and tell us about that little story.
Yeah, when I came to, we were rolling down the road in the truck, blown up, all kinds of, I won't go into that. So the truck came to a stop, and I was trying to look out the window, and I realized that I couldn't see out of the eye that my hand had been covering when I took a nap. So the first thing that popped into my mind when I realized that I couldn't see out of that eye was excitement. I thought, wow, excitement. Excitement. I've never had this happen. I've never been one-eyed before. This could be fun. And I remembered a dream. When I was in graduate school, I had a dream about my grandmother. In the dream, she was blind. She had died a couple years before, and she wasn't blind in real life, but in the dream she was, and she was painting these beautiful pictures in my mind. And I asked her, Grandma, how can you paint such beautiful pictures in my mind when you're blind? And as soon as I said it, I thought, oh, stupid was that? She leaned in and she said, Natalie, you don't need eyes to see. And here I am, one eye, can't see out of one eye, and I'm thinking of this, and I'm excited. I was honestly getting really excited. I thought, maybe if I can't see out of this eye, it'll let me see other worlds more clearly. And then I thought, wow, that's really kind of demented. I want to see out of both eyes, snapping back out. But that excitement, that was real. That was very, very real. And it still informs the way I understand my injuries and how I understand the world. I mean, it changed things for me, definitely.
So would I be at all correct in saying, so, I mean, we could almost think of our souls as having that same sort of excitement for even the negative experiences, what we would consider the negative experiences a lot in our lives. So, you know, our soul saying, you know, wow, I've never had that experience before, to have that challenge. That's exciting to me.
Completely devoid of fear, you know, devoid of all the things I should think, devoid of me judging that experience by some, whether it be, you know, a cultural context or a personal context. It was just being right in that moment and being excited for that moment and what that moment could hold for me.
To me, that is so powerful. I'm gonna end what we're gonna learn about here. I'm gonna ask you about your injuries next, but to me, that is just so powerful. It's just a great way to end this interview. And I don't think I need to beat it to death. You know what I mean? I think people certainly will get that. Hugely powerful to me. So thank you. I think if that was the only thing that I came away with in this book and in this interview, that alone could change my life. Tell us about what it's been like. Tell us about your injuries first. The injuries that resulted from this whole thing.
I had some shrapnel broke my right heel. I had a bunch of shrapnel in my left leg. My right wrist was broken, and both the bones of my arm were shattered. I had a hole in my skull here with some shrapnel in the frontal sinus. I had shrapnel in both eyes. Lots of cuts and stuff, of course, but I also, all the bones on this side of my face were broken, and I had a skull fracture, which I think is redundant. Then things like broken teeth, you know, that had taken a quick exit through my face, and some other scratches and stuff like that.
How about your eye?
The eye, at first they just thought it was blunt force trauma injuries, other than, you know, they got the shrapnel, tiny little pieces of shrapnel out, and that really wasn't a huge problem. But the retina had been tattered, really, from the explosion. And when the swelling went down in this eye, the retina detached. And they reattached that, even though it was all tattered. But because there was also a little bit of optic nerve damage, that eye doesn't read all the light. And they took the lens out because of all these surgeries. And the damage to this part of my face damaged some of the muscles. So now I see not quite as much light as this eye reads, and it's blurry because there's no lens in it, and it's tilted because of the muscle damage. And they did move some muscles around and fix that a little bit, but they can't fix it entirely. So I kind of have double vision.
Yeah.
In that.
And, you know, how about emotionally after that? You know, have you had emotional kind of reactions since then? You know, everybody talks about PTSD. Have you experienced that sort of a thing?
Well, you know, it's kind of interesting to me. I didn't experience any PTSD symptoms until I got out of the hospital, and then they were mainly sort of physical reaction things. Like if I walked outside, I was running scenarios through my mind all the time. Anything could happen, anything. You know, I'm thinking, okay, what if a car jumps the curb, or what if that tree falls down on me, or what if there's a sniper on the roof? What if, you know, I was running through all the things that could possibly happen. I mean, that could not even probably possibly happen. You know, a satellite could fall out of the sky and slam into me. I mean, I honestly, and I've talked to other soldiers and they understand this.
Yeah. Anything
could happen.
Yeah.
And walking by a piece of garbage on the road, I would walk to the other side of the road and go around it because that garbage could blow up.
Ah.
So I did. I mean, it probably seems like I shouldn't have PTSD symptoms after having this experience, but I do, and I still do. They're different now, but I still do have them.
How do you deal with them? I'm sure some days are better than others, right?
Yeah, some days are better than others. And I did a lot of sort of work on my own that probably psychiatrists or psychologists do with other people. You know, I started, when I'd see that trash by the side of the road, I would walk right up to it. I would make myself walk right up to it. And honestly, sometimes shaking and sweating. I would walk up to it, I would touch it, I would pick it up, I would hold it, and I would look around and say, I'm here. And then I'd set it back down. And I did that kind of thing over and over. Or I'd sit on the couch and go, oh, you know, a tree could fall through the ceiling right now, or the gas line could blow up. And then I'd stop myself and say, is it likely that the gas line is going to blow up? Probably not. You can go down and check it if you want to. You know, and I just kind of slowly worked those kind of things out of my system. Now they're different things, like I said.
So you certainly haven't come out of this unscathed, and yet, how do you feel about life? Are you glad you came back into your body?
Yeah, it's fun. I mean, even with all of this, even, you know, sometimes even when I'm in the midst of a shaking, you know, kind of PTSD experience, there's a part of me that's still standing back and kind of giggling and going, well, I've never done this before. You know, this is new.
Yeah.
Even interviews. I mean, I've told you that interviews make me really nervous, and part of that is the PTSD. Yeah. You know, I've got all these scenarios running through my mind, but even within that, there's a part of me giggling in the back room, going, this is different.
Good for you. Good for you. Well, I think it's great, and I think you're a great example and an inspiration to so many of us. I was going to show a couple pictures from the book, but my light has gone, so I'd be surprised if anybody could really see those. I guess we can try. Now that I mentioned it, I go and mention that. I don't know if you can see that, but that's her and her fatigues. And then there was another one on the next page. You're getting, this is when you're getting an award, right?
Yeah.
The civilian version of the Purple Heart, is that correct?
Yeah.
What's that called?
The Defense of Freedom Medal.
Wow, that's quite an honor. And it's been quite an honor to have you here. And honestly, I can't thank you enough, first of all, for your patience with the technological issues that we were able to overcome. We overcame. Yeah. And to tell your story and share it with everybody, it's been absolutely amazing. I know that you don't have anything to, I asked you in the last interview that we couldn't show, you don't have anything to promote other than the book, Application of Impossible Things by Natalie Sudman. Thank you so much, and I just wish you the very best.
Thank you, Bob.
Bye now.
Bye.
That's all for another fantastic Afterlife TV episode. Bob couldn't be happier. If you enjoyed this episode as much as Bob, please leave a comment on AfterlifeTV.com, Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube. And don't forget to check out Bob's book, Answers About the Afterlife. Thanks for watching Afterlife TV.